Well, it is at that time of the season where impeachments are the order of the day. Today, all eyes will be on the Senate as Meru Governor Kawira Mwangaza fate is now lies in the hands of the 47 senators. As much as there are over 60 there, only the 47 elected senators will have the final say to ensure if she stays in office or she will be removed by way of impeachment. Good morning and welcome to the show. This is News Check. My name is Abdiaziz Hashim. You can get in touch with us on our social media handles at KBC Channel 1 as well as at Abdiaziz Hashim 1. A little bit of backgrounder of what is happening today is that 59 out of the 69 MCAs voted in favor of impeachment of Kawira Mwangaza. In less than a year, Kawira Mwangaza has appeared before the Senate, but this time around it will not be before 11-member committee, just like the other time it was before the Kakamega Senator Boni Khalwale-led committee. This time around, it will be a plenary session of all the senators, something that they debated a week ago, and of course they decided it should go the plenary way. Now, some of the former governors who have appeared before the Senate and have not survived their impeachment is former Kiambu Governor, that is Ferdinand Waititu, and former Nairobi Governor Mike Mbuvi Sonko. Now, some of those governors, former governors rather, that have appeared before the committee and have survived is the former Wajir Governor Abdi Mohamud, but was later reinstated by the courts, and Governor Anne Waiguru Kirinyaga Governor, and currently she is the chair of the Council of Governors. She is the only one who has survived the impeachment by a committee way, but after the 2022 polls, Kawira Mwangaza has been able to survive in December last year. Will this prove to be another session where we saw the former Embu governor, that is Martin Wambora, was able to survive several impeachments by the county assembly? Even before it reached the floor of the Senate, he was reinstated by the court. Will Kawira Mwangaza exhibit those traits of having 9 lives? That is a matter of wait and see. The session will be back on at exactly 11 a.m. There was a little bit of a hiccup when they started at 9, lack of quorum, but we do understand some of the senators are currently held up in a meeting with President William Ruto at State House in Nairobi. That is the discussions that we'll be having this particular morning. Also, we'll be keeping tabs on other stories making headlines, especially ahead of the State of the Nation address this Thursday, where President William Ruto is going to give the scorecard of the Kenya Kwanza's administration, what is achieved and what it has not achieved for the last 365 days or so. We also have our reporters stationed in various parliamentary groupings and, of course, various events across the country. Once we do get them, we'll duly inform you. But I'm not alone this particular morning. I'm here with Mercy Wanjiru. You saw her earlier in Good Morning Kenya. She is an advocate of the High Court. Mercy, good morning and good to have you once more.
Thank you for having me.
The first question will be, Mercy, this is not the first time we're seeing a governor being impeached and brought to the Senate, but this will be the second time Kawira Mwangaza is brought to the Senate in less than a year.
Correct.
What are we looking here? Are we looking at her leadership style, or is it politically motivated?
I think they definitely look at the leadership style. But as far as the leadership style is concerned, the most that the Senate can do is probably reprimand her or, advise her, as they did in the previous impeachment proceedings, where they noted that there is definitely a lot of strife and conflict between her and some of the Meru leaders, and that she needs to look into that. But that is not necessarily an impeachable offense. But I do know that could be a key underlying reason why we are having these impeachments being brought against her from time to time. But more importantly is it's good to note that the Senate takes impeachment proceedings very seriously. And as you rightfully put it, the senator of Embu survived twice. Yeah. So it means that this is not a question of how many times you're being impeached, but whether the impeachment offense is substantiated. And that is what we are looking to see during the plenary session. Yes.
And the timing of it all, Mercy, you can see at Meru right now, given that I come from that particular county, there are clashes at the border points between Tharaka and Isiolo. We have now the torrential floods that we're witnessing in various parts of the country due to the short rains that we're receiving in the country. Is it the time to consider impeachments of leaders, or we should be focusing on service delivery?
No, it always is about focusing on service delivery. And I would want to know, in as much as the Meru County Assembly has brought charges against their governor, the question that they need to also address is whether these offenses are affecting the wider society. So what is really the society saying about this? Have they carried out public participation, for example?
Yes.
Are the people discontent with the services they're receiving from Kawira Mwangaza? I think that is very insensitive of, especially if the charges are, they fail to meet the threshold that is required. It would be very, very unfortunate that Meru County Assembly have chosen such a sensitive period of time to bring impeachment to ground services in Meru County, and instead focus on bringing impeachment proceedings against the governor without substantiating them. So I think it's rather insensitive. But let's just wait and see whether the issues that have been brought before the Senate are weighty. And by weighty, for me, I truly feel in this season, weighty here means, have the offenses been committed by Kawira Mwangaza? Are they truly affecting the wider Meru County? Yes.
Given that you're an advocate, I'm sure you've seen some of the offenses that have been lined up against the governor. Do you think they will stick?
Some of them, honestly, outrightly, I can tell you they will not. You know, for example, the misappropriation of funds contrary to the Public Management Act. You know, the Meru County Assembly is alleging that she is embezzling funds through members of the family. So how are you going to prove that she's embezzling through a second party? What kind of evidence? I'd be very curious to know what kind of evidence you've tabled. Have you tabled, you know, transactory, evidentiary documents to show that there's a connection between the embezzlement of funds by this member of family and the governor? Because remember, you must show a connection, a nexus between the offense and the governor. So if you say that a third party has embezzled funds for the benefit of the governor, what is the connection between this embezzlement and the governor? You must strictly prove that according to the standards that are required by Senate as far as impeachment proceedings are concerned. So some of them outright, I will tell you, they will not hold any water. Some of them might be upheld. Perhaps the issue of illegal appointments without going through, you know, county approvals. But the question again is that an impeachable offense? Yes. So I think that the Meru County Assembly needs to ought to have critically looked at the report that was submitted in the previous impeachment proceeding and be well prepared. Because if they do a shoddy job this time around, it could very well be that they may be the ones who will go home, and that this will just look like a witch hunt. Yes. So they need to play on the side of caution. Yes.
If it is a political witch hunt, in your words, then why do you require the whole Senate to listen to a case? Why not select another 11-member committee to listen to a case?
I mean, Senate has the discretion to decide, you know, whether it's going to go the plenary way or whether it's going to go the special committee way. And for me, really, it's a question of which one will accord the governor fair administration. That needs to be critically looked at. Of course, both sides, you know, both divides, you know, the majority and minority argued that it was one or the other. But I think that the fact that this is coming before Senate and this is being debated in Senate is now a reason for them to go back and come up with the legislation to unify one type of method for hearing these impeachment proceedings, and allow it to align with the constitutional provisions of fair administration action. So, you know, whether it's plenary, whether it's through a special committee is neither here nor there. My biggest worry is whether it will meet the constitutional threshold for fair administration action.
We have seen a number of cases. You've just mentioned Martin Wambora, who is the former governor of Embu, and also he was a former chair of the Council of Governors, surviving thrice in the county assembly.
Was it thrice or twice?
Yes, it's twice and thrice in the Senate. But his cases didn't even reach the floor of the Senate. He was being reinstated by the courts. That was spearheaded by President of that particular time of the judiciary, who was David Maraga. Do you think this particular scenario is shaping up to be like that one?
Not necessarily, because if I can recollect, I think that the good governor tried to stop the proceedings, and she was not successful.
Yeah.
So it might not take the trajectory which the one for Governor Wambora took. And I think that it will just go through the entire plenary session. Yeah. So I think for me, I'm just curious, as the senators were as curious as well, because some of them said, they are new in parliament and they want to see how plenary sessions play out. But this isn't about. It's not as a classroom. This is a governor's career.
Yes.
This involves the people of Meru, and they deserve a fair hearing. Who knows whether this governor is actually performing? That's a bigger question. Is this governor actually performing, despite this subsisting wrangles between her and the members of county assembly? Is she actually performing, or this is a personal vendetta that is being brought against her? So. I think that the people of Meru deserve for there to be a fair, so for the truth to really be exposed in a fair and procedural way. Yeah, that's what they deserve.
Viewers may be wondering as to why we are bombarding them with this impeachment trial that is even yet to start at the floor of the Senate. But given that you're an advocate, Mercy, if I am impeached today, what does that mean? Can I even lead a cow dung back there in a farm, back in my home, or be a chief or even a class prefect to that particular matter?
Do you mean can I lead?
Yes, can I lead other
subsequently,
people? Yes.
Or can I lead during the period when the impeachment proceedings are going on?
No, when after I'm impeached.
Right.
Because that particular impeachment, we have seen it sinking so many careers, especially in the political limelight. But what would it mean for me personally, as a person? Can I even run for state office?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, all this boils down to who elects a governor, what they look for in a governor when they are electing them. So up until now, if you read the charges, it is not very clear that the actions of this particular governor are impeding her ability to offer service delivery.
Yeah.
There's absolutely no evidence that that is happening, or as far as I've read the charges are concerned. So she could be impeached several times during this term and still be re-elected, just because the people of Meru are seeing that services are being delivered. And I think that is what people care, and especially at such a critical time where standards of living is astronomical, people are struggling. Is she actually delivering on the ground? When you go to the ground, things might be very different. Perhaps they are content, and it is Wanjiku who says whether you will be successful in the next election or not. It has nothing to do with these impeachment proceedings. So the MCAs might be doing this to try and frustrate her. I'm not very sure. But at the end of the day, what is Wanjiku saying at the ground? They might actually be content with this governor. We do not know.
Okay.
Yes.
When it comes to the disbursement of budgets to the counties, I do know a certain portion goes to the county assembly, be it maybe 35%, but we have seen various county governors, when they appear before public accounts committees or CPAC, for that particular matter of the Senate, when they're auditing what they have been able to do with that particular budget, many of those governors exceed the constitutional threshold for allocating budgets to the county assembly. Would you say that that is a point of shielding themselves from what might come from the county assemblies in the way of impeachment?
Yes, because always it really is about allocation of resources and giving a member of county assembly the opportunity to manage resources, because that is the only way that Wanjiku can test true leadership in this country. It is really not how articulate you are in your manner of debating. It is whether whether this particular MCA is disbursing bursaries, whether this particular MCA is able to lobby for certain roads to be constructed. So it could actually be the reason why some of these governors are surviving impeachment. You'd actually be surprised if you look in Kirinyaga that is actually what is happening.
Okay.
So you just need to have a good working relationship with the MCAs without necessarily going against the rule of law. Yes.
Now, veering a little bit into politics, given I'm sure you're an avid supporter of politics and you follow it keenly.
Sometimes.
But there was an incident where the president and the deputy president, Rigathi Gachagua, they tried to intervene in that particular Meru case. They tried to solve in their own way. It will seem the MCAs and the governor were still not having it. We're still in the same instances now in Kiambu County. I'm sure you've heard a number of MCAs want to impeach the governor, but yesterday they had a meeting with the deputy president. Would we say that this is the season now? We're entering the season of impeachments.
I don't know whether we're necessarily entering the season of impeachment, but I think that now members of county assembly are becoming aware of their powers.
Okay.
And they are not now afraid to exercise their powers, as opposed to previously where they were still learning the ropes. Remember, devolution is still very young, and there have not been very many county assemblies. And so I think now is when they are flexing their muscles.
Okay.
So it may not necessarily be a season for impeachments, but I think it's a season of testing the waters. And it's also a season where they are fighting back, and they are calling for a change in legislation to allow them to have just as much authority and power as they see their colleagues, members of parliament, having. They have their own CDF, they have their own kitty. So they are trying to flex their powers, flex their powers to see whether they can have legislation changed in their favor. So I think that is what I'm seeing playing out here. Yeah.
You've just said a critical word. They're looking for ward fund. Let's say, for example, they're given that particular ward fund and they do not rely on the governor to allocate them budget. Now that will mean the governors will be at the mercy of MCAs year in, year out.
Yeah.
Will that be the scenario?
Let's just see what formula they will come up with when it comes to allocation of ward funds. Maybe it may not necessarily be the entire, county budget. I've not necessarily looked at any particular bills that have proposed this ward funds, but certainly I would not expect that the governor would, the governors would agree to allocating the entire county, budget. to ward funds. And I think that would be rather irresponsible thing to do, but because there's only so much that an MCA can do. What then would be the role of the governor vis-a-vis the MCA? So it may not necessarily be allocating the entire ward fund, but I think the time is ripe for that to happen. Sometimes there's a lot of bureaucracy when it comes to accessing those resources through the county level, and sometimes the person that you can actually access is your member of county assembly. So perhaps this needs to be relooked at critically. Yes.
Is it also high time, Mercy, will be looking at the 2/3 or the threshold for impeachment of a governor, a county executive committee member? The reason why I ask this is because you saw an incident in Baringo where the CEC of roads was being impeached for personal hygiene and because of his beard. Is it the high time now when we look at the threshold of impeaching these leaders from office?
I think it's high time to relook at the academic qualification. Really, surely this is now high time we now revisit academic qualifications, because where would an MCA come from, attempting to impeach a CEC on those grounds? And remember, this is a CEC who, number one, they need there's certain academic requirements that they need to meet before they are appointed as a CEC. Whereas for an
just a minute?
Yes.
Willie. Just continue.
Yeah, so this is a CEC impeaching on a hygiene basis, and this is someone who has met the necessary academic qualifications.
Yes.
And yet you probably have not. So let's rethink first the academic qualifications of the MCAs and whether they can actually articulate these issues as seriously as they deserve to be articulated.
But you saw the court already ruled on that particular academic. You don't require a degree to become an MCA.
Yes, but you see, the court can only rule on what is legislation. The court is bound by what is law. So it is imperative that now the legislators come and rethink whether, and this actually plays out even in this Meru incidents. Did these guys actually go back and read the report in the previous impeachment proceedings?
Okay.
Yeah.
Hold that thought. We're coming back to that particular retrospect. Thank you so much. And of course, we want to head over now. I do understand that today is World Quality Day celebration, and the chief guest, that is PS for Industry, Dr. Juma Mukhwana, is currently speaking. Let's listen in. But the conversation this particular morning that we are having is concerning the impeachment of Meru Governor, that is Kawira Mwangaza. Earlier on, we had a little bit of conversation with Mercy Wanjiru. She is an advocate in terms of what lies before the Senate, given that this time around, Kawira Mwangaza will not be facing an 11-member committee as opposed to what she faced in December last year. This particular time, it will be the whole senators. As much as there are over 60, only the 47 elected senators will have the final say. Will she survive or will she be impeached? That is just in a moment of 30 minutes or so. We'll go live to the Senate's proceeding. Right now, we do understand it was a pre-hearing trial that is a closed door. And of course, the media as well as the public will have an open view starting from 11 until tomorrow, when of course she will know her fate, if she will stay in her office or the deputy governor will have to step in before an election is conducted. But that was the other issue. Before we get to the threshold matter, Mercy, it's all about, first of all, we do not have, if the deputy governor will be taking over. Right now, even we do not have an IBC in place to be conducting any election to that matter. But as the deputy governor is taking stance and is expected to choose a deputy governor, what are the constitutional timelines are we looking at in terms of getting the governor in place after, let's say, for example, she is impeached?
Assuming that she is impeached? I'm not very, I can't say I'm well abreast with the exact timelines, but it's interesting that, and that, let me look at this from a political, know, angle of what have just come across my mind. It's interesting that some of the charges that have been brought against the governor concern the relations that she has with her deputy.
Yes.
And one wonders whether this has been strategically, the impeachment has been strategically brought in order to replace one or the other.
Yeah.
Maybe this is now the preferred person to work with the member of county assembly or not.
Because in the first instance, the deputy was in support of the governor. But right now, we can see even the deputy leading the forefront of saying that the governor lacks support from us as well.
Yes. And one wonders whether that now has occasioned the rise of this second impeachment. I think just from a political angle, that it would be interesting for Meru constituents to sort of observe whether that is the reason why this impeachment has been brought to light. I'm not very sure about, I won't comment about the timelines. I was not prepared for that. But as far as the deputy governor is concerned, let's keep a keen eye on how this plays out between her and the governor moving on forward.
In the initial conversation, before I cut you off, we listened to the World Quality Day where the PS was speaking. We were talking about threshold, which is very key. Should the governors be pushing for this, or should they allow the senators to draw a bill that they will bring before Senate so that it can be passed?
Push for what exactly?
The threshold, to increase the threshold of impeaching a governor, a deputy governor, and a CEC from office.
Right. I mean, I don't see what the current threshold, whether there's any challenges as far as the threshold is concerned. But I don't think that the governors should necessarily participate in deciding what the threshold should be, because, I mean, obviously you can only imagine what threshold they've set for themselves, and that would defeat the role of oversight anyway. So Senate has already pronounced itself on what the threshold is, and that has worked out in the various precedents. We have seen that happening in the various precedents, and I do not see that necessarily hurts the governors, because we have seen that Senate is taking this role very seriously and is looking very critically at the evidence tabled and the facts. So they should not necessarily be worried about, revisiting the threshold as far as I'm concerned.
Now, fast forward to this particular morning. We've just seen the speaker sitting in the House from 9 a.m. in the morning all the way to 9:30 that they're accustomed to come to the House, but they lacked quorum. Should we be starting to read into that?
Yes, we should start being worried about that, because when Senate retires to look at whether they need to unify the procedure for hearing impeachment, they need to look at the behavior of Senate in terms of quorum. How has Senate been behaving in terms of quorum? Are these people who have a habit of failing to attend, proceedings to discuss or to debate matters of national importance, such as this one? And so if it comes across that the plenary has more shortcomings than the special committee, I think they need to relook at whether they would prefer one or the other. Yes, but then this particular challenge was raised during the debate for whether or not it should be plenary or special committee, and now we are seeing that it is playing out perfectly. There is no quorum. Senators have opted to go for a parliamentary group meeting at State House. Why they did not? Why I do not know the reason why they decided one or the other. I'm sure they knew, they had consulted their diaries and they knew what was supposed to happen today. So I do not understand where the conflict arose as far as quorum is concerned, but it is quite disheartening because that goes to the root of whether or not it affects the fair administration hearing of this fair administration hearing of this particular matter. And this is something that actually the governor can actually challenge in court, that her constitutional rights were actually infringed.
That's why I wanted to ask you, what her legal reprieve if she is impeached today? She
certainly can raise the question that she did not receive a fair hearing. Let's just see whether this issue of quorum and whether subsequent other challenges that will come out during the plenary session will form a good basis for her to appeal the decision before the Senate.
Because we have seen the courts playing a key role in the instance of former Embu governor, that is Martin Wambora.
Absolutely.
Also in the former Wajir governor, that is Mohamed Abdi Mohamud, who was reinstated by the courts itself. So if she does not get reprieve from the Senate, she can also seek from the corridors of justice.
On certain grounds, absolutely.
On certain grounds.
Yes.
And of course, now finally, as we wrap up this particular segment of the impeachment, what should her legal representation be looking at, aside from the charges leveled against Kawira Mwangaza?
Unfortunately, they are only restricted to look at the charges that have been raised. They are restricted to looking at the evidence that has been tabled. They are perhaps they will probably, I foresee them raising a question of whether this issue has previously been decided by the Senate and what the Senate ruled in favor or against, specifically whether for example a legal appointment is an impeachable offense. So they're really restricted on the facts, the charges that have been tabled, the evidence, and whether it meets the standard of proof, and that is it. Yes. Lawyers are usually very linear and strict when it comes to how they handle their matters.
Okay.
Yes.
It is a matter of wait and see, and of course in the next 20 minutes or so we'll be heading over live to the Senate, of course, for that particular hearing. As we informed you, 59 out of 69 MCAs voted in favor of impeachment of Kawira Mwangaza. There are several charges leveled against her, including naming a road after her husband and of course nepotism in terms of appointment of county officials. Will those charges stick? That is a matter of wait and see. As I told you, there are over 60 senators, but the people who mostly count when it comes to voting are the 47 elected senators who will either hammer the final nail on her career coffin or save her for the second time, of course, proving that she might be exhibiting the traits of former Embu Governor Martin Wambora, that indeed she has 9 lives. Now, the other bit where we're discussing this particular morning is the upcoming State of the Nation address by none other than President William Ruto. He is expected at the vicinities of the National Assembly by 2:30 p.m. exactly, and of course from journalists all the way to the legislators who will be flocking to that particular sitting, and of course where that is where the President will be giving like a scorecard of what his administration has been able to achieve for the last 365 days or so, and of course on the promises that he made, how much has he achieved so far. And of course we saw so many pollings in terms of what he has achieved, but we await the President to tell us what he has achieved in the administration or has not achieved, and what is the long-term goal of this particular retrospect. But let me head over to Mercy once more. Mercy, there are a lot of issues that we do anticipate the President to be speaking of. Right now, the country is experiencing torrential floods in several parts of the country, especially in the northern parts of the country, where even we have lost lives. There is the issue of food production in the country. We are talking about the debt crisis that we're currently facing. What will even be the priority of this current administration when he heads over to address the nation?
I think the priority is very clear: fuel prices. food security. It's always been recurring. Fuel prices, food security, energy. Energy is also a key issue that is definitely going to be discussed. Anything that really lowers the cost of living of Mwananchi is going to be discussed. I think unemployment, the rate of unemployment is going to be discussed as well. And I think those are the priorities. Question is whether the current administration has made any substantial, not even substantial, but has made any headway towards addressing this issue. We have seen some, improvements here and there. And some of the challenges that the administration has faced are not necessarily occasioned by the shortcomings of the administration. Some are. So, let's wait and see what the president says concerning these particular key issues. Yeah.
On those key issues, you've just said fuel, because fuel affects everything. You even heard what the Energy Cabinet Secretary Davis Chirchir yesterday alluded to. If the Hamas and Palestine war continues, it might even reach 300. But he said clearly in his own mouth that he hopes it does not get there. But what can the government do? Do you think this government-to-government fuel importation and export will at least alleviate us a little bit, especially at the pump?
Yeah, I think it's very easy for blame to be shifted from time to time. Yeah. But I would assess a good cabinet secretary on the basis of how they can mitigate some of these risks. It is anticipated that the actions of one government can affect the other. But what role are you really playing when it comes to applying or implementing mitigating measures? So are we always going to be at the mercy of other governments perpetually? Because we do not know where we are headed as a global community. So we would like to know what kind of mitigation measures this particular CS has as far as energy is concerned. And I think people are tired of hearing that this is this has been occasioned by this government, this has been occasioned by this other government, and so our hands are tied. So why are you there as a cabinet secretary? How did you not anticipate that this would happen? So given that how we saw the Russia and Ukraine war played out and how it affected us. Given how we saw COVID play out and how it affected us. So this can no longer be a perpetual reason for why we are suffering as Kenyans. You need to come up with a solution. And I think that's what Kenyans just want. They want solutions. That is it. Yeah.
And of course, as the president, let's say in his particular speech, he'll be giving recommendation to what is ailing various sectors across the country. Do we anticipate Parliament to take up from there, given that they oversight the national government? In what capacity would they take? In terms of oversight and ensuring all those key solutions that the government has stated it is implementing?
If they actually play their oversight role as they should, then that would play out perfectly. But we now see what happens with where the majority members of parliament come from a certain party, so that what is important is driving the party agenda and not necessarily looking into their oversight role. So I think that in a perfect scenario, if Parliament decided to engage their oversight role, then that would play out perfectly in terms of ensuring that what the president promises is actually actualized. But if they decide to play party politics and they decide that they are going to support the president and overlook what the true role is at the expense of the common Mwananchi, then we do not foresee that anything will change in the near future. Yeah.
And of course, I do understand today it is the day of the Chief Justice. We'll be heading over to her in just a few. But the other part we're looking at, aside from the issues of the cost of living, what are we looking at? Given that yesterday, even economic experts were before the bipartisan talks, and they were saying that the high taxation, we do have debt crisis, and also corruption has played a part. Do we think the president, first of all, will address the debt crisis that has plunged us to an abyss that we're even trying to get out of?
And it's, the local debt, or is it local debt or international debt? The question is, why are we taking these loans? It always boils down to why we're taking these loans and whether the projects that we are allocating this budget are going to be sustainable, and they are going to, at the end of the day, they will, allow the country to begin to make enough income for them to sustain themselves. So I don't think that necessarily taking a loan is a bad thing, but the question is why is the money being appropriated the right way?
Okay.
Yes. So can the president justify why he has, or why the government of the day has taken or has taken or exceeded the loan requirements that the law stipulates? Have they exceeded the threshold, or are they within the limits? But either way, he has to justify whether this debt is necessary, whether as a country we are making money, or whether things are remaining the same and yet we are still going into a debt crisis. Yes.
And of course, it was even localized to the extent even Kenyans do borrow from Fuliza, borrow from this particular initiative that is spearheaded by the government, the Hustlers Fund, but they cannot return the money because of diminishing returns. How can the government, let's say, for example, in your view, improve the status of the business environment in this particular country?
I think one of the ways is taxation. Like you rightfully put it. If you take a loan today and maybe the amount of, the license requirements rises, and which you had not anticipated, that of course affects your ability to have any meaningful income from the loan that you've taken. It might actually frustrate it. Of course, the other reason why the Kenyans are unable to pay off this loan is also the reason why they're taking these loans in the first place. And whether they had any financial management acumen to actually manage these loans in the first place. So we do not know the reasons really why these loans are not being repaid, but certainly we have seen a spike in taxation. We have seen a spike in licenses. I think in Nairobi I've seen, the license for opening a bar has increased. So those kinds of things are the things that impede, the common mwananchi from making a profit from what they borrow. So, certainly the government has a role to play, but I've always said this: you can raise the taxes and you can raise the fees as much as you can, but you need to justify it at the end of the day. Let's just see what his long game is, because he only has a 5-year term, and at the end of the 5-year term, he needs to justify why he subjected the Kenyans to such high taxes, why he subjected them to high cost of living, because he's always maintained that this is just for a short period of time. Hii ni kwa muda kidogo tu, muvumilie kidogo tu, alafu maneno itakuwa sawa. So let's just wait and see whether he actually keeps that promise, and whether the methods he's using to raise resources for this country are actually going to be used in the manner in which it's supposed to be used. Yes, and of course management of the resources.
Yes, of course, with the high taxation, we do anticipate the government, especially KRA, to be collecting or even meeting its target that is being set out in the financial budget of 2023-2024. But there is this particular dragon that normally appears from nowhere, because yesterday even the Treasury Cabinet Secretary was placed on the spot. He was asked, in a country, do we even budget for corruption? Is it the high time we start budgeting for corruption, because we know certain amount of money will be looted? But he clearly stated that that was not the true position. Would you say that, or we give this particular government enough time to slay this dragon?
Well, I don't know whether that can be achieved within a 5-year term, but certainly let the government of the day show that to some level it has reduced corruption. It will not necessarily address it completely, but let it show that, one, it has reduced the level of corruption and mismanagement of resources, and that it has increased the ability of government to use the resources that is, in its hands to do the thing that it's supposed to do. So is the service delivery improving? Even as they work at reducing corruption, is the service delivery improving? Because Kenyans are realistic, and they know that you do not slay the corruption dragon within a 5-year term. Certainly probably not even within a 10-year term. But let's just, will this regime offer service delivery better than the previous regime, given the challenges that they are facing right now with the global economy, the local economy, and so on and so forth.
Like from the PS we've just heard, that was PS for Industry, Dr. Juma Mohwana, clearly stating that for us to even create more jobs in this particular country, we should be focusing in the manufacturing sector, which has suffered, especially due to COVID-19 and other external shocks. But we should be discouraging importation. Will that be achievable, and will that solve even that unemployment crisis in the country?
It could, if those other external factors affecting manufacturing are addressed, such as energy. Energy is a huge factor that is affecting the ability of Kenyans or ability of manufacturers to carry out their business profitably. A lot of industries have closed, and so people are wondering whether this is actually a profitable venture in the first place. Ideally speaking, that would be the way to go to increase employment, but whether the government will address or mitigate the issue of energy costs in favor of addressing these particular issues of manufacturing is another thing altogether. I do not think that it can survive high energy costs. Yeah, manufacturing cannot survive high energy costs. So let's see what the CS for Energy is going to do about that, even as they anticipate on trying to work on improving the manufacture sector.
And of course, we've even seen the president, especially when it comes to his foreign relations with other countries, especially in Africa, he has been an avid supporter of climate change. We even saw, we have had the first ACS 2023 that was hosted here in the capital, and there is that Nairobi declaration that will be, he will spearhead in COP28. Do you think the government is right to move that, to that particular way of leveraging economically on carbon credits that it was clearly stating in the ACS 2023?
Absolutely, why not? We've always maintained that Africa is the continent that is actually emitting the lowest carbon emission. And to that end, the other global, the countries from the other global community needs to take responsibility, and that came out clearly. And I appreciated the fact that the president came out strong in actually holding them accountable. They not only need to make pledges as they have in the past, but they actually have to meet these pledges because they are responsible for the carbon emissions more than we are as Africans. So I personally support whatever endeavors the president has to spearhead the climate agenda, if he is going to extend the conversation that we had here in Nairobi, which led to the the declarations that we made. I 100% support it. I think that the global community need to be held accountable. What we have seen in the past is they making a lot of pledges here and there, but none have been met. And that has actually been there's a unified voice from other African nations that has been happening, and that needs to change. So we need to make them accountable for what their role is.
And of course, with green economy comes green jobs. At the end of the day, we even saw the president in that infamous yellow motorcade that he was driving to and from back to State House. Do you think in the automaking sector, Kenya will even leverage more, given that you even saw president launching electrical motorbikes in the country? Is that an industry to tap into, especially right now?
Absolutely. With that comes a lot of other industries. We're looking at service stations coming up, and more people being employed. I have not critically looked at the feasibility of electric motor vehicles vis-a-vis the petroleum ones. I saw Donald Trump really trashing
especially reducing traffic here in the capital.
So I haven't looked critically at the feasibility of that project, but we need to look at it critically before we decide whether this is for us or against us.
And of course in the manufacturing sector. But aside from that, his foreign relations, we have seen him visiting numerous countries. We have seen him especially recently in Saudi Arabia, where he clearly stated that he has secured a deal where 350,000 Kenyans will be able to go there, given that we are hardworking people and work in that particular retrospect. But unemployment, will that solve it?
It may solve it, but we also need to look at the quality of employment we are securing for our Kenyans. We have not had a very good experience with people working in the Gulf countries. We have now specific department for diaspora affairs. I'd be very keen to see what kind of policies and legislations the PS for diaspora affairs will put into place to safeguard the interests of Kenyans living there. So it's one thing to be able to send Kenyans to the Gulf to work, but what's the quality of jobs you're securing for them? What is the are they safe? Are Kenyans safe, or do you expect to bring them back in body bags? So it's good for them. It's good that the president is negotiating these jobs for Kenyans, but at the same time, let's also look at the labor conditions that are being offered for black people and for Kenyans in these Gulf countries. Are they negotiating, good, just as good terms as, other Asian countries are when they are in these Gulf countries? I hear, people like Filipinos are getting a better deal than Kenyans, such in certain scenarios. Yeah. So are we negotiating the best deal for Kenyans as opposed to just, you don't have a job here, so just go and see what you can get out there. Yeah, so what exactly is the nature of this deal that he has negotiated is the bigger question. Yeah.
Quickly, let's come back here to the country as we await that particular session of the Senate. We have seen floods in various parts of the country. Is it high time now the president declares it a national disaster?
What qualifies, floods to be declared national disaster, I don't know. But had they not anticipated that this would happen? Did they not have a budget for this? Had they not told us that they were going to take measures? Did they not prepare themselves for El Nino? I think we saw that they told us that they did. How is that budget being implemented in this particular case? All eyes are on government to see what happened to that money. We saw, I don't know, they said they'll come with speedboats. We would be using speedboats to
the governor clarified, he said there were no speedboats in Nairobi.
So they did tell us that there was a budget that was set aside for mitigating, the risk that will come with floods, El Nino being, I think, worse than what we're seeing right now. So what mitigation measures are now being put into place for such, for such a scenario? This is now what triggers those mitigation. If there indeed are floods which can occasion, a matter of national disaster, this is now what triggers now the country to look into the mitigation measures that they had, given that they were prepared anyway. They were prepared beforehand. So let's now see how that will be implemented, whatever mitigation measures that they had put in place. This went, I think, through cabinet, and I think I saw the cabinet dispatch concerning that. So let's just see how that plays out. Yeah.
And of course, it was something that was discussed truly in the cabinet. But the other issue is we do anticipate also the president to be talking about the doctrine of separation of powers, especially when it comes to the judiciary. How do you find, especially from the legal side, this current administration when it comes to court orders?
I think it's obeying it to a certain extent. I'll give you two scenarios. Well, let me give you one scenario. I think with the appointment of CAS, Chief Administrative Secretaries, that has been halted by the courts. The government has obeyed that, and despite the fact that, in Kenya, loyalty is a currency you cannot underestimate, and the president was sort of politically obligated to look into, sort of like give back to those who supported him. But given the court orders, I think, as far as that is concerned, they are obeying the court orders. I've seen several scenarios where court appointments have been revoked and they've held their ground. So it's a wait and see. But as far as I'm concerned, I see an improvement, which is different from the previous administration.
And on the judiciary fund, given that it was fully operationalized, given that I'm sure legal fraternity is taking care of that particular coffers as much as it is under the judiciary, would you say the judiciary has amply utilized that judiciary fund?
We'll wait and see. We'll wait and see after the end of the financial year whether that has been done. But that's a good step towards the right direction in ensuring separation of power, just as it was when it was when the National Police Service was given autonomy as well, and they were given their budget now to manage so that it does not impede their function. So that was a step towards the right direction. I do not expect there to be a problem with management of the judiciary fund. I do not expect that to happen. But let's just see the end of the financial year, how that is. Or that how it plays out, yes.
And now slowly to the agricultural sector, which is the food basket of our country. Has the government even put enough stringent measures to ensure that our farmers there, what they produce, go to the market?
So from farm to plate,
has
the government looked into that? I think it has taken certain steps towards that. you know, the I'm not a farmer myself. Yeah. I joke about being one, but I'm really not one.
You should try.
Yes, I've been challenged many times, but I don't know. I think it has taken some steps towards ensuring that happens. Probably there's sort of infrastructure we are seeing. Maybe we have tackled roads. Probably we have tackled roads, and then of course there was a fertilizer subsidy. So it has taken some, you know, the government has not been here for long, maybe a year plus. So it has made some slight improvement towards ensuring that mitigates the issue of food insecurity. Yeah, the certain measures they've taken mitigates food insecurity. But let's give it a bit more time. It's not going to be a day's thing. Yeah, it's definitely not going to, especially putting in place the infrastructure involved in the value chain process. Yeah, it's not going to be a day's thing, but we have seen the government try to tackle it, you know, one issue at a time. Yeah, depending on the urgency. Yes.
Well, of course, with retrogressing subsidy, they've also sought to ban importation of food products into the country.
Right.
Yeah. So the issue is, have they done enough, especially at the port, in terms of taxation, which are currently high right now, on bringing on those particular products into the country? Would it even be wiser to bring in food or produce it here in the country?
Some people argue it's wiser to bring in food. Some people argue against it. You know, what method generally what method affects the general, you know, country as opposed to a few cartels? Because where's the noise coming from? Is it from the few cartels, or is it from the general public? So I think that's what the government needs to look into. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That is Mercy Wanjiru, an advocate. Of course, today you had to play an advocate as well as an analyst, not a governance expert. Thank you so much, of course, for joining us this particular morning. Now, I do understand I need to hand you over to the Senate for that particular impeachment hearing of Meru Governor Kawira Mwangaza, which is a plenary session. I do understand that all the senators are there, and of course, they're there to listen to both sides. We do understand the council representing the governor as well as the council representing the members of the county assembly are already within the vicinity of the Senate. I want to hand you over there. My name is Abdiaziz Ashim. My co-anchor has been Brian Muraru. Let's listen in.